Have you ever thought about why Apple stores feel so high-end, even though they're basically just tables and glass? It's not the Apple products, it's the restraint, materials, and design of the store. And homes work the same way. When you use the right combination of materials and design concepts, you can make your home feel high-end too. So in this video, I'm going to show you 10 things you can add to your home that give you that same expensive feeling every time you walk through the front door. So stone accents are one of those upgrades that instantly raise the baseline of a room. They add weight, texture, and that quiet sense of permanence that makes a space feel like it was deeply considered, not just thrown together at the last minute. So using a marble side table immediately makes your room feel more grounded and intentional. Because marble has natural veining that does all the visual work for you, so you don't need a lot of styling on top. Even with just a few books and maybe a small piece of decor, it already feels elevated. That's the power of a material that looks good before you add anything else to it. A travertine block coffee table also works because it feels solid and architectural and not like regular furniture. The low, chunky form gives the room a ton of visual weight and makes everything around it feel calmer and more balanced. And since travertine has a ton of natural texture, it adds depth to the room without needing any pattern or color. And so the room instantly feels better designed, even if everything else stays minimal. Adding in a quartz tray is another easy way to make your everyday surfaces look more refined. The weight of the stone turns small items into a single deliberate setup instead of scattered clutter, and even basic things like a candle or a book feel a lot more premium when they're grouped on something that has real weight to it. So it's a small change, but it completely shifts how the surface feels. And then a stone pedestal paired with a stone lamp base creates that gallery-like feel that you usually see in higher end homes. The pedestal brings some height and structure, while the stone lamp base reinforces that sense of permanence. And because both pieces already feel substantial on their own, you don't need extra styling around them. One strong vertical moment like this can carry an entire corner on its own. And by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, if you want to see a pretty cool tool I've developed that allows you to visualize your home but upgraded so you can see what's possible in your specific space, I'm going to share that with you in just a few minutes. Now, adding in some curves is one of the fastest ways to make a room feel more expensive without changing the whole setup, because soft, rounded shapes break up any sense of rigidity in the room, which makes your space feel calmer and better designed. So using curved seating is a really easy way to soften a room, even if the main pieces of furniture are more squarish. In this setup, the coffee table is boxy, but the curved sofa, rounded stools, and cushy chairs balance out those straight lines. And because your eye keeps moving instead of stopping at those sharp edges, the whole room feels more fluid and plush. And so this is a great approach if you don't want to replace larger pieces like tables. But using a curvy coffee table works just as well when the rest of the furniture is more boxy. So here, the organic table shape becomes the focal point and immediately softens the room. And since the sofa and other seating stay more structured, the table really stands out because one rounded piece like this is often enough to make the entire space feel more elevated. Now, textured cushions and throws are one of the easiest upgrades that make a space feel layered and expensive because they add depth without changing any furniture, and they make even simple seating feel more intentional and more finished. So using patterned textured cushions instantly lifts a plain sofa. Here, the mix of woven fabric, subtle patterns, and some fringed edges adds that visual interest without relying on bold colors. Instead, it's the textures doing the work, which keeps the setup calm but not flat. And this is exactly how neutral spaces avoid becoming boring. Also, adding a chunky knit throw is a simple way to bring both softness and weight into the room. The thick weave and visible fibers create contrast against smooth upholstery and wood furniture, and when a throw looks substantial like this, it feels really thoughtfully placed. Even if it's draped casually over the arm of a chair, it makes the seating area feel warmer and more premium. And using plush bedding layers works the exact same way in the bedroom. Having a textured throw at the foot of the bed breaks up any flat linens and just adds that hotel level coziness. But the key is choosing those materials that are both textured and rich, not thin or overly smooth, because texture is what makes the bed feel inviting and styled. And on that same note, layering multiple cushions with different textures is what gives this bedroom its depth. You've got woven pillows, softer fabric ones, and a heavier throw all working together in unison. So none of them are loud on their own, but together they create a collected high-end look. Now, replacing your carpet with wood flooring is one of the biggest upgrades you can make to instantly raise how expensive your home feels, because wood adds both warmth and character, but more importantly, it makes a space feel permanent. Now, if you want a moodier or more dramatic look, choosing darker wood or a herringbone pattern is a really smart move. The pattern adds visual interest without relying on color, and the darker tone gives the room depth and richness. It feels more custom than standard plank layouts, and it instantly signals intention. And this kind of flooring really becomes a design feature, not just the background to the rest of your home. But going with lighter floors can also work beautifully if you want a brighter, more open feel. Pale wood reflects light and keeps the space feeling airy and calm, and it's especially effective in rooms with lots of windows or minimal furniture. Light floors also make it easier to layer in different styles over time without the space becoming heavy. Now, if you still want some softness underfoot, you're going to want to add a rug on top of your wood flooring instead of going with wall-to-wall carpet. A rug defines zones, anchors your furniture, and makes your entire setup feel finished without covering the entire floor. And so you get that warmth and comfort where you need it, while the wood keeps the room looking clean and elevated. So this combination is what makes spaces feel both cozy and high-end at the same time. Built-ins instantly make your home feel more expensive because they look permanent, and when storage feels like it's part of the structure of your home, the whole space feels more considered instead of like it was haphazardly pieced together. So one good way to do this is to use full wall built-in shelving with some lower cabinets. The open shelves give you plenty of space to display books and other objects, while the closed storage below hides your everyday clutter. And because everything runs wall to wall and lines up really cleanly, the room feels calmer and more elevated, even with very simple styling. Also, adding a recessed built-in niche is a subtle but powerful upgrade because it feels architectural. When shelves are set into the wall and finished in wood, they look planned from the start instead of like they were added later. And even a small built-in like this one can make a space feel high-end because it reduces visual clutter and again, feels permanent. And then installing built-ins around a window, including something like a window bench with built-in storage, turns what might have been an unused wall into a feature of your home. The bench adds seating, the cabinetry adds hidden storage, and the whole setup feels cozy at the same time. So this kind of detail shows up a lot in expensive homes because it combines function with structure instead of relying on standalone furniture. Now, mixing old and new pieces is one of the fastest ways to make your space feel expensive because it breaks the look that you bought everything all at once. And homes that feel high-end usually look collected over time, not like they were pulled from a single catalog. So pairing a vintage style console or table with some newer lighting and accessories instantly adds depth to your space. The older piece brings character and a sense of history, while the modern lighting keeps it from feeling dated. And this contrast makes the whole setup feel deliberate, but not overly styled. Now, another way to achieve that sense of balance is to place an antique cabinet next to some more modern seating. The cabinet adds weight and that lived-in feel, while the clean lined chairs keep the room from feeling heavy. And that push and pull is what gives the space a relaxed, expensive vibe. Now, mixing a modern sofa with vintage or handcrafted accents, like an aged vessel or a classic wall lamp, also keeps the room from feeling flat. The newer furniture brings that sense of comfort and structure, while the older pieces add texture and soul. And when nothing matches perfectly, the space feels more personal and a lot more considered. Now, one thing we haven't talked about at all yet is plants, but fresh greenery instantly makes a space feel more expensive because it signals care and upkeep. And homes that look high-end almost always have something living in them, even if everything else is minimal and restrained. So adding a large indoor tree or some other kind of tall plant in a well-curated pot creates an immediate focal point in your room. The height draws the eye upward and fills any surrounding negative space, so it's true that one strong plant like this can carry an entire corner of your room. Using branches or loose greenery in a substantial vase, especially on a kitchen island or a dining table, just gives the space a relaxed editorial feel. And this works better than tight bouquets because the shape feels organic and effortless. It's the kind of arrangement you see in design magazines because it looks so natural. And if you want to take this to the next level, then place your arrangement on a pedestal or stand instead of directly on the floor or on a table. The added height gives the plant even more presence, plants and lends the setup an almost gallery-like feel. If you do this tastefully, even a single vessel with a couple of branches will feel truly special. Now, if you're unsure what kind of plant to get or where to place it, this is exactly why I built a tool for this. Instead of guessing or buying plants and hoping they work later, you can actually preview how those plants will look in your space first. All you have to do is take a photo of your room, upload it into the tool, and it shows you what the space looks like once plants are added in different placements. That way, you're making decisions visually, not blindly. So take this living room as an example. Technically, it already checks all the boxes. There are curved pieces, stone elements, vintage touches, wood flooring, and a layered rug. So on paper, it's a great setup, but without greenery, it still feels a little lifeless, almost sterile, like a showroom instead of a home. But once even just a couple of plants are added in, everything shifts. The space immediately feels warmer, more relaxed, and more lived in. And the greenery softens the hard edges, balances out that neutral palette, and adds that natural contrast that makes the whole room feel finished. So this is a great example of how plants aren't just accessories in a room, they're what bring the entire room to life. But if you want a different feel, the same room can work just as well with another layout. Anchor the space with a tree in the corner to add some height, and keep a smaller one here next to the fireplace with a flower arrangement on the opposite side. And that shift changes the energy of the room again. So it's the same space, but you get a different feel depending on where and how you position the plants. And here's another example of how much greenery can change the feeling of a space. This dining room already has great bones, table scale works, the lighting is strong, and the materials are solid, but it still feels a bit flat and formal. And with just about everything sitting at the same visual level, the room doesn't quite feel alive. But once you introduce plants, the whole space softens. The tree in the corner adds height and breaks up the symmetry of the windows, and the floral arrangements on the dining table and in the opposite corner really warm up the room. So even though nothing else changed, the entire room feels more full, more welcoming, and more expensive. It's the exact same room, but now it's got life layered in all the right places. So if you want to try this for yourself and see how your own home would look with different arrangements of plants, there's a link in the description. Now, adding lights above your art is one of those quiet upgrades that instantly makes a home feel high-end. And it signals that the art was considered as part of the space, not just hung to fill an empty wall. So using a sleek, minimal picture light over a piece of art is one of the simplest ways to elevate a room. The clean fixture keeps the focus on the art itself instead of competing with it, and by lighting the piece directly, you give it a sense of importance even if the artwork is small or subtle. And this kind of setup works especially well in living rooms, bedrooms, or entry areas where you want a single focal point. Now, choosing a long bar-style picture light feels even more architectural, especially for wider or more graphic pieces. The light spreads evenly across the artwork, which feels polished and deliberate, and this is the kind of detail you see in boutique hotels and well-designed lounges because it adds atmosphere without adding any additional clutter. And even in a simple room, a bar light like this makes the wall feel finished. And if you really want to make your space feel high-end, you can install matching picture lights across multiple pieces of art on the same wall. That repetition creates rhythm and turns the wall into a curated moment instead of a casual gallery. And suddenly, the space feels less like a hallway and more like a museum or private collection. And that sense of order and confidence is exactly why this setup feels expensive. Now, trim and wall detailing instantly raise the baseline of a room because they add depth where most homes stay flat. And even simple furniture looks more expensive when the walls and ceiling are doing some of the visual work. So using classic trim paired with crown molding makes the whole room feel finished. The panels break up the walls into proper proportions, while the crown molding visually lifts the ceiling and adds that old home weight that people associate with higher end spaces. Nothing in here is loud, but the room still feels expensive because the architecture itself is doing the work. A modern minimal take on wainscoting also works when the lines stay clean and the detailing is precise. The lower wall paneling adds some depth, and the ceiling detail quietly mirrors that geometry, so the space still feels cohesive cohesive. And this kind of restrained detailing feels custom because it's subtle. It doesn't try to impress, it just looks right. And then classic wainscoting brings in that timeless European feel that people associate with established estates. The paneling adds shadow lines and a bit of texture, which keeps the walls from feeling flat even when you use neutral colors. And when you do this, the room feels layered and permanent, like it's been there for decades instead of recently renovated. And if you want to take picture lighting to the next level, pair it with trim or paneling instead of leaving the wall flat, because adding molding, wainscoting, or subtle panel details behind the artwork makes the light feel almost built in. Suddenly, it stops looking like you just added the picture light, and it starts feeling like a gallery wall or an old European hallway where the architecture and art were planned from the beginning. And that combination of light plus detailing is what pushes your place from nice to luxurious. So using high quality materials seemed so obvious to me that I almost left it out of this video, but it's also something a lot of people underestimate, even though it's one of the biggest reasons a space will feel expensive long term. Because timeless materials age well, look better with use, and don't rely on trends to feel good. So let's look at a few examples. First, using solid wood furniture with visible grain immediately gives a room a level of depth and character that flat, factory finished pieces simply don't have. In this setup, the cabinet isn't flashy, but the weight of the wood, the carved details, and the natural variation in tone make it feel substantial. And these are the kinds of pieces that look even better over time, because when the material itself carries visual interest, you don't need to over-style it for the space to feel finished. And high-quality metals work the exact same way. A well-made brass or bronze faucet instantly elevates a kitchen or bathroom because it's got weight, texture, and the potential for patina. And so instead of looking shiny and new forever, it softens with use and starts to feel lived in. And that subtle aging is what separates a space that feels curated from one that feels like it was just installed last week. It's quiet, but your eye registers it immediately. And when you mix those materials with furniture that's built to last, like leather seating, solid wood frames, and well-crafted metal details, the room starts to feel seriously grounded. These are pieces that don't need replacing every few years, which is why high-end homes often feel calmer and more confident. Nothing is trying too hard, but everything looks like it belongs because it was chosen to last, not just to look good right now. So by now, you've probably noticed that none of these ideas are about chasing luxury in the way most people think about it. This video wasn't about buying designer furniture, copying magazine homes, or spending more money. It was about something quieter, understanding why certain rooms feel expensive even when they aren't, and why others never quite get there no matter how much you spend. And if you zoom out, there's a pattern running through everything we covered. Curves, texture, architectural details, none of these work because they're trendy. They work because they add weight and clarity to a space. They give the room a foundation. And when a room has a foundation, it feels calm, confident, and complete. But most people get this backwards. They treat interior design like decoration, something you layer on top at the end. So when a space feels off, they keep adding pillows, swapping furniture, or chasing the next idea they saw online. But that rarely fixes the problem. Really, it just creates more noise. And the reason is simple. You can't decorate your way out of a weak foundation. Because what actually makes a home feel expensive is when nothing feels accidental. When the room has clear priorities, clean lines of movement, and enough restraint that the important pieces can actually breathe. Because it's that sense of ease that people read as high-end, even if they don't know it. The good news is that none of this requires a huge budget. It just requires your attention. Because once you learn what actually moves the needle in your home, it stops feeling like a collection of stuff and starts feeling like a place that's settled, not halfway finished. And that's the real upgrade. Not an item in a shopping cart, but the ability to see your space clearly and make decisions with confidence. Because when you know what matters, your home doesn't just look expensive, it also feels right. And now that you know the items that make your home look high-end, the next thing you need is a system that takes everything to the next level. So watch this video next to learn the system that can take any room from average to downright beautiful.